The following can be offensive to religious audiences. Contains scriptures and information not popular among ordinary Christians, and could possibly change your outlook on Christianity forever. For those with deeply held religious misconceptions and beliefs made up from thin air, it is suggested to seek advice from a source knowledgeable of Scripture before viewing.
Welcome. Glad everybody's joining us tonight. I know people are going to kind of file in here, so we'll get started anyway. But welcome to our Tuesday night podcast. This is not your ordinary church, and we, as always, welcome you and encourage you to ask questions. This is open forum. We're here to help people. We're not here to entertain or just put on a show for people. We are here to help, and so ask questions. Be raw. Don't be shy. Ask the questions that are on your heart, and God will help you. And there's a lot of resource here, and so the reason we're here is for you to have access to that in an open forum way. We don't script this. I ask questions. Pastor Ford answers them, and tonight's going to be a good night. Pastor Ford walked in today, and he said, tonight's going to be a good podcast. And I said, why? And he said, I don't want to say. You'll just have to wait and see. So I'm asking the questions, which makes the whole conversation interesting. Anyway, I'm Jordan. This is Pastor Ford.
Hello, everyone.
We want to talk about goals tonight. And first, I want to talk about why we came on this topic. Last week we were talking, and I won't go into the whole context of it just for time's sake, but we were in a conversation, and Pastor Ford was talking about what happens when parents don't have goals, is their kids don't have goals. And so we were talking about goals in general. They need to have a goal. He's talking about kids and the need to have a goal. So in that context, what did you mean by goal? Like, in general, just specifically in that context, though.
Mainly, the point that I was making was the idea of a purpose. And so there's goals, but goals are short term. Those are things that you do, 3, 5 years, whatever. Purpose is a lifetime thing.
Mm-hmm. So Jordan Peterson mentions. I actually watched like a snippet of he does this. He does his own podcast, but his daughter also does a podcast. She interviews her dad sometimes, and he mentions his daughter asked him the question, "What would be your message to men in their 20s?" So I just got a text that we're like getting echo on the mic or something like that. Is there feedback coming through or something? Anyway, we'll try and get that solved here. But we got. He basically, she asked, "What would be your question to men in their 20s, or your advice to men in their 20s?" And he said, right off the bat, make a plan, get disciplined about something, find something you're interested in, and allow you for the possibility that you have something to contribute to the world. My question is, what can man contribute to the world in a general sense? What are things that man can contribute to the world?
You mean mankind in general?
Yeah.
Mankind.
Or let's just talk about the individual. Let's talk about like for young people, from that context. Like what? Let me ask you the same question. What would be your advice to men in their 20s, as far as their contribution to the world, going forward?
Well, I can only speak from the perspective of what's really important. There's all kinds of.
That's my hope.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ideas that people have, in terms of it. Like I was mentioning the other day, talking about religion, being religious in San Jose is just an utter waste of time, because San Jose, California, is the sort of epicenter of where people come together that want to influence the world. Their only interest is in influencing the world. And so they come here and they want to, work for Google, Facebook, whatever, any of the big companies, Apple, and but they're here with, okay, how can we change the world? Regardless of what that means. I'm not here to try to debate the morality of the things that they're doing, but their idea is changing the world and doing things. They're not here just to make money, though. Obviously, there are people that are here making money, but what I've learned in living in the Bay Area is that once you start making money, you realize that making money is not hard, and then you start realizing, wow, am I just going to live my life for making money? Is that all I'm going to do with my life? And so they really want to start using their lives to do more than make money. They want to make impact. They want to change the world. They want to, autonomous cars, like Tesla and things like that. Sending rockets to the moon. Elon Musk and a lot of his things. They want to do something. That changes the world. And so, being religious, it's not even a counterfeit. Being religious is a cop-out. It's what I believe that, so what is, you could be that kind of a person who wants to change the world. And if you come to a point to where you realize, you know what, I'm pretty much a loser. I'm not going to be able to change the world. But you don't actually want to admit that publicly. You don't want to go publicly and say that you're a loser. Then you become religious. Because you don't have to worry about it then. Because, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do anything with my life because this life doesn't really matter. Ha, ha, ha. See? So I found the better way. No, you haven't. You found the cop-out. You found the losers. The losers, it's as one of our pastors always says, the loser's limp. You hurt yourself, because you tripped over your own feet, but you don't want to let anybody know that you tripped over your own feet. So you kind of limp off, so that people will cheer you. He was hurt. That's why. And so that's what some people do with their lives, is that they realize that they're going to trip over their own feet trying to do something incredible. So then they become religious and that's why. I get it now, because you're really dedicated to your religion, which really they aren't. They aren't dedicated to it. And so now I want to go to another level, and that's the thing that is in my mind, is that what if you decide, you know what, I'm going to do something with my life that has eternal purpose, and I don't want to just change the world, I don't want to just change, make a car that drives itself. I want to take people to heaven for all eternity. I want to go into countries, nations, and tell people about how they can have eternal life with Jesus Christ and live forever in heaven and not in hell. I'm going to change eternity. Now you're talking about something worth living for, because there is nothing, you die, when Elon Musk dies, or Bill Gates, or any of these people, when they die, I always referred back to it because he's probably one of the most sort of influential individuals who died recently is Steve Jobs. You've left a company behind that makes toys. There'd be like, the guy who's the guy who started Toys R Us. I'm sure, that somewhere along the lines, if he's still alive, so what, it's like, who cares? And what's the difference between Apple and Toys R Us in terms of 100 years from now, or 1,000 years, or 10,000 years from now? It's not going to mean anything. They'll just be one of the people along the way who made toys that we played with, and then we got new toys by a new company who eclipsed Apple or Google or whoever else. But when you give your life to doing what God's purpose is for our lives, now you're talking about something that's never going to go away. It's never going to go away. Here we are, 2,000 years later, and we still, 2,000 years from now, probably nobody's going to know who Steve Jobs is. But 2,000 years from now, people are going to know who Peter and Paul, are, because they gave themselves to be the first ones of starting the new eternal business, which is the souls of men.
So there's a story in the Bible most people are familiar with, and I won't go into the whole story, but David and Goliath, probably, top 5 most well-known stories in all the Bible, because it's used all over the place, even outside of religious contexts. But I was thinking about this from the standpoint of when David actually shows up. So the army of God the army of Israel is arrayed against the army of the Philistines, and the Philistines send out their champion, this big, massive giant, and he's saying, just send a man out to fight me. And they're there for a while. They're there for days, and nobody's coming out to challenge this guy. David shows up, and he says, who is this guy? And he starts kind of lipping off, and his brother comes up to him and he says, he starts kind of rebuking him and telling him, I know your heart, you just came out here to see the battle. And, and David's statement, he says, is there not a cause? He says, what, is there not a cause? And he says, don't worry about it. I'll go fight him. And so he goes and fights him. And the question is, so this is his brother. His brother was there as a soldier. He was there at the battle. He was there. That was and from what the scripture says, it almost sounds like all his brothers were there. But David wasn't. He was keeping his dad's sheep. So he wasn't a soldier. He shows up, and he goes out and fights. Everybody knows the story. He goes out and fights and wins. What was the difference between, as far as you can tell, what's the difference between his brother and him? Why did David see a cause past the giant, and all these guys saw was the giant? And how do you convince people to think that way now? Because you're talking about a purpose that's past, this life.
Yeah.
And most people only see the giant. They only see what's right in front of them. They only see the difficulty of getting there.
Yeah.
So how do you get past that?
Yeah. See, that's the beauty of that story, and that to me, I'm listening to this. I'm thinking, boy, if we had talked about this beforehand, that would have been a great thing for me for you to set me up with. I mean, that's an underhand pitch that I'm going to be able to very easily knock out of the park. I mean, it's so fantastic. It's such a perfect example of exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. Because David's brother Eliab is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. He's your classic San Jose, I want to change the world kind of guy. This is God's man. Samuel says when he comes to his father's house and to anoint the next king, and he looks at Eliab and he says he's head and shoulders above everybody else. He's a beefy guy. He's got the nerve. He's got everything. He's a 16-cylinder guy. And so everything's ready to rock and roll in this guy's life. And so Samuel's like, this is the guy. And he goes, no, he's not the guy. And then he brings in David. After he goes through all of his sons, he brings in little David, who's been out with the sheep, and anoints him. And so you look at the story and think, well, what's the deal there? Well, now you jump ahead to the battle, and now we know exactly why, David. It's clear as day, because here's Mr. Beefy, Eliab, hiding with the rest of Israel, because he won't face a giant, because he hasn't got what it takes to defeat a giant. He has what it takes to defeat the normal affairs of life, but not the extraordinary affairs of life, because he's only living for this life and for the goals and the purposes of this life. That's what makes the story of David and Goliath so attractive, is that no matter how you look at it, from whatever angle you look at it, the story keeps telling you more and more and more about the reality of what true heroism is in life. Is true heroism is when you can do what you cannot do. That's true heroism. And see, Eliab couldn't do what needed to be done. He couldn't face the giant. There was no facing that. David had nothing to bring to the table to face Goliath with. He had nothing. He wasn't from San Jose. He wasn't there to make the world a better place. He wasn't there with the idea, I'm going to use my genius and my skill and my cunning and my size the world's going to see, what can be done, through somebody who's dedicated themselves to this pursuit, and because that was Eliab, and Eliab failed. No, can't be done. No, nope. But here David comes and says, no. I see what the rest of the world can't see. I can see into heaven, and I can see that there's a God in heaven, and I can see that the God in heaven is all powerful, and that the God of heaven gets involved in the affairs of men. And so this is a very powerful, powerful lesson, because David says, I'll do this. I'll go out there, because I'm not going out there alone. I'm going out there because God's sending me out there. I can do this, not by my own strength, not by my own ability, but by God's ability. And he's able to tap in to something that nobody else is able to tap into. And it's because way back, there was a lion, there was a bear that came when I was watching the sheep to attack the sheep, and I confronted them, and I killed them. This is not normal man stuff. This is not because he was big enough to do it. There's none of that there. It's because he said, no, I know that God gets involved in the affairs of man. And so this became David's purpose. Yeah. And that's the key right there, is that David's purpose was not within himself. His purpose was to God. It was to glorify God with his life. I'm going to glorify God with my life. Everything that I have, everything that I am, just dedicated to God. I'm not a high flyer. I'm not a 16-cylinder person. I haven't got all that it takes to be able to achieve these things. I'm not a Samson. I'm just me, but God. And that became his purpose. And that's what we see all through. And even with David, if anybody who knows the story of David and knows David's sin with Bathsheba and all the crazy, stupid things that he did, the one thing that never ever happened with David is David never came to a point where he said, you know what, I'm going to set my sights on this life.
Yeah.
I'm going to live for this life. Even with all that played out, and he's going now to he's not going to be allowed to build the temple. He says, no problem. I'm going to get all the materials together.
Yeah.
I'm going to do everything I can to make this work. And so he's doing because he's glorifying God. His whole focus and purpose is to glorify God. And see, and this is the thing. This is why there's. I'm listening to the book I mentioned to you, Boy Crisis, podcast by Jordan Peterson. Another book I was reading. What was it? I can't remember the book I was reading beforehand, but just the number of times this same refrain comes over and over and over again. The problem in our day and age is boys are not becoming men. And I was thinking about this. This is why video games is so popular. Is because video games are the perfect way for a defeated boy to feel like a champion. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing in our generation is we're seeing boys that have been emasculated. They're now wimps. They're sissies. They may go to the gym and they may get big, but inside they're defeated sissies. And so they spend all their lives playing video games because it's a fantasy world where they can be the hero. Because in real life, they can't be a hero. But this is the thing, is that they could be the hero. They could be the hero. They think they're not the hero because their brains are all scrambled as far as the understanding that God, when you live to glorify God, what you can do with your life, the sky is the limit. And I realized that there came a point, because I was going down that road. I played video games in my 20s, and I even had my friends over as a Christian playing video games. But as I began to pursue God's will for my life, it became very, very clear, one or the other. You're going to either live in video game land or you're going to pursue the things of God.
Yeah.
You can't do both. And now my son, who just got announced to go pastor, he's been, over the last couple of years, he's been experiencing the same thing. He was really, really, really super heavy into guitar and playing guitar and watching guitar videos, and it was the thing. And now he's like, you know what? This is just so meaningless because my purpose is to glorify God. And so in doing that, you begin to feel the excitement and the adventure and the fulfillment and the pleasure that you're trying to get out of a meaningless video game. Yeah. And you think, I don't need this anymore. That's the thing. I don't need it anymore. And I really do believe this is why you see people, that are just, they're addicted to video games, addicted to scrolling. I mean, screens, addiction, all those kinds of things, is because in that world, they're the hero. Yeah. In that world. But in the real world, they're not. They're not heroes. Because, like I said, their brains have been scrambled. A lot of it's because of the pressure of our society, where things are headed in our society, the attack against masculinity that we see continuing, on and on. And it's funny. One of the intros of this book, Boy Crisis, is he talks about that percentage-wise, the majority of men, although they want to have a boy for a child, they prefer to have a girl. And the reason is because it's easier to be a girl than it is to be a boy. And this is what I'm talking about. And so this is why we have boys now that are growing up and they're young adults and they're hiding now. They're hiding. This is part of the draw of being involved in a gang. It all ties together. All of this ties together is the reason why people are wasting their lives. We look at this, you see them getting involved in drugs, pornography addictions, getting into gangs, video game addictions, all these kinds of things, especially with young men. The reason why you see all this happening is because there's a hero inside and that doesn't know how to express itself. And that's David. That's David. But he's not knowing how to express it. He's the hero. He is the hero. That's why David and Goliath. It's like David and Goliath. Who's the hero in the story? David. He is the hero. He is what every man wants to be. But it's not. You don't find it in the gym. You don't find it in university. You don't find it in any of those places. You only find it when you begin to glorify God. When your life is given to glorifying God, all of a sudden you find purpose, real purpose, because it's eternal purpose. People that you touch, that you influence, as you begin to develop, as you begin to disconnect yourself from all of the fantasy heroism. When you disconnect from, I'm not going to be a part of the gangs. I'm not going to be addicted to drugs. I'm not going to be addicted to pornography. I'm not going to be addicted to video games. I'm going to live for God. I'm going to live for God, and I'm going to discipline my life. I'm going to be like Jesus. Doing that, all of a sudden, you begin to realize my life is having a purpose now. I have a purpose, and this is going to go on for the rest of my life until the day I die. And then after I die, other men are going to carry that same torch that I've given them, and it's powerful. It's powerful.
Yeah. So that reminds me of a scripture. I actually didn't put it down in my notes, but I was reading it before we came, and when talking about somebody who could be successful in San Jose, Paul probably could have been very successful in San Jose and been a success in general, business and whatever.
Apostle Paul.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so in Philippians 3, he actually talks about this issue of, he basically names, it's very rare that he does this in any of his letters, but he names off his credentials.
Yeah.
I mean, literally just goes right down, like, I'm of the stock of Israel, tribe of Benjamin. I mean, he just totally names out his pedigree, basically. I have something to say. I have a good resume. And then he says, but this one thing I do, he says, I count all that as loss. He says, putting the things behind that are, the things that are behind, forgetting the things that are behind. This one thing I do, I press toward the mark of the high calling of God. And that word mark actually means goal. It's actually talking about a goal. And so my question in that context is what is it? Where's the point that somebody switches from, the direction that Paul was going? I mean, for Paul, it was a literal. He was on a road, and Jesus stops him, and then he says, "What do you want me to do?" Where is that transition point? Because I've Pastor, we just recently got out of the rally in San Jose, heard a few seminars there, and Pastor Mitchell, who's now the son of our founder, is now the leader of our fellowship now, says that when he first got saved, it was like including God in his life. God's going to help me with my plans now. But there came a transition point where it was like, whatever you want me to do. Why is it that some people can come in and have like this almost baggage of their plans and getting God into their plans? And what's the transition point between that and the mark of the high calling of God? Where's the transition point? What needs to happen? What needs to be experienced?
It's catching the spirit of the New Testament. It's catching that.
How do you catch that, though?
Okay, as you're reading through the New Testament, and this is the other thing. I'll tell you right. If you're listening right now and you're not going to read the Bible, switch off. Just turn off, because there's no point. There's no point. This will never happen to you. You will be playing video games for the rest of your life, and you will only be able to find your heroism in fantasy. So you're gonna continue. If your problem is pornography, that will continue, because that's where you're the hero. And if it's video games, that's where you're the hero. If it's a career, a job, that's where you're the hero. You'll never get out of this. You'll never make this transition, because you're not willing to do the single thing that is the difference that makes a difference. Is that you've got to read. You've got to read the New Testament, because it's the only way you can see it lived out. Because especially you read the Gospels, is that here's Jesus. He's communicating to his disciples. This is the thing that blows my mind. The things I hear people say about Jesus, and then I read the Bible. When I first read the Bible and thought, where do people get these ideas about Jesus? They just make them up. They just simply make them up. We have very creative minds, and what we want somebody to be, it's part of the hero worship. And my son and I were talking about this afternoon. Is that people, they have favorite movie stars, and the reason why they have favorite movie stars is because of things that they like about those movie stars. They've never met them. They've never spent 10 minutes with them, but there are things that they like about them, and they know nothing about them, nothing whatsoever. But they like them because they inject into those people what they believe those people are like. It's pure fantasy. It's not what those people are like at all. And this is, I think, a lot of the reason why people commit suicide. Why movie stars, people like that, commit suicides, is because they realize they're not the kind of people that people think they are. They give them these attributes, but it's not who they really are. And they're afraid that one day people are going to realize, you know what, I'm just a jerk. That's not me at all. And so that's a real difficult thing. And so if you're going to read the scriptures, you're going to learn. You're going to see Jesus, what he said to his disciples. You're going to see it. You're going to see it lived out, and then you're going to see the transition that the disciples made when they got filled with the Holy Ghost. There was a transition that took place. Jesus told them, this is where you're at. This is what you're doing. These are the mistakes you're making. These are the problems. These are issues. These are the things. Oh, yeah. Okay. Never really got it. And then they get filled with the Holy Ghost. And all of a sudden, there's that transition. Because that is the issue. It's getting filled with the Holy Ghost. Not speaking in tongues. It's getting filled with the Holy Ghost. When the Spirit of God lives inside of you. But there has to be that surrender. They went back and they prayed. They were there for 10 days. They prayed, and then the Holy Spirit came. Jesus didn't go back. Okay. You're back. Good. Okay, now let's go on with the next part of the thing. No, for 10 days, they had to sit there not knowing what was going to come next. They just had to simply say, okay, God, I'm ready. I'm ready. And the truth is that, honestly, if you think about this, I wonder how many people listening right now would actually be willing to wait 10 days to find out what God wants for their lives, just to pray straight ahead for 10 days. Most people, they pray 2 or 3 times, and then after that, it's like, oh, forget it, I'm just going to do it my own way. And they never do. They never find God's will. But when you can get to a point to where you just obey God and don't put time limits on things, and you just do what God says, then there comes a time where the Holy Spirit comes upon you. There's a supernatural dimension, and God can begin to lift you and begin to use your life, and you'll never go back. And that's what Paul experienced.
So, for all you men out there,
men and women.
Hold on. For all you men out there, Brittany Minor is always putting you to shame with questions, by the way. Brittany has a question. Everyone who has goals or thinks they have goals, but what should our goals be specifically?
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is that you have to have a purpose that you set goals for. And that is the thing, is you have to have an established purpose, and that purpose has to be to glorify God. And then when your attitude and your purpose, when you've established, okay, my purpose is to glorify God, then you're praying, you're asking God to help you to set what that looks like. For me, that was being a pastor. But God called me to be a pastor. I didn't choose to be a pastor. I didn't say, this is the best way I'm going to be able to glorify God is by being a pastor. It was
how soon after you gave your life to Jesus did that?
Days. See, this is another. There's so many question marks that I have for modern day believers, because because there were things that I never struggled with. And the reason why that I never struggled with them is not because I'm so perfect. It's just simply because I came from a background of not being a Christian to becoming a Christian. It just made sense. Like Paul. I mean, like you said, how do you see, even think about the way that you ask the question. So how does somebody go like Paul from that place of going this way and then, okay, God, what do I, well, for Paul, that was right then in a moment, but just think about the question. The question is like, okay, so we need to sit down, chart this out, maybe get a blackboard, go through the ideas, the thought processes, various things like that. But here's Paul. It was a decision, and that's all it was. It was just simply a decision. And so Paul just decided, okay, what do you want me to do? I know who you are now. What do you want me to do? End of story. I'm done. I've been doing it this way because I thought that's who you were. But now I don't. I know that I didn't know who you were, but now I know who you are. What do you want me to do? And go to Damascus, and I'll tell you what to do next. So he went to Damascus. It wasn't like, okay, well, I'm definitely, I promise you, you know what? Next week, definitely going to Damascus. No, seriously. I know I've said this 5 times before, but this time I'm definitely going to Damascus. He just went to Damascus. There was no wrestling. There was no fight. So he went to Damascus. Ananias shows up. Ananias tells him what God says. He doesn't need another visitation from Jesus. Jesus told him, I'm going to tell you, what's going to come next. And so Ananias goes. And no problem. I don't care. Ananias, not an apostle, not somebody special, just some disciple, some guy who just shows up who says, I'm from God, tells him what to do, and he does it, and it's no big hassle. Because he just wants to do what God wants him to do. He's I know I say it a lot, but it really is as simple as surrender. And so until you've made the surrender, there's no point in trying to make goals. Because your goals are just simply, how do I get to a point to where I'm surrendered to God? Okay, so this week my goal is going to be, and then after that I'm going to do this, and then after that I'll do this, and then after that I'm going to do this. And so you have all these goals all arranged and all set out. But the problem in it is that you haven't decided that you're going to live for a purpose. You haven't made that decision yet for an eternal purpose. You haven't done that yet. Until you do that, until you say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to live for eternal purpose. I don't care, what I have to give up for that, because that's the problem. It's the what comes next. You say, okay, I want to do this, and then God says, okay, I want you to do that. Okay, definitely put that in the calendar. Yep. Okay, what else? No, that's what I want you to do right now. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on it. I'm definitely going to work on it. And get okay. Well, but what now? Nothing. That when you do that, we'll talk about the next step. I'm definitely going to do it. So what's the next step? What do I do now that I have this? And this is where people get stuck. Is that they want to live life for a purpose, but they want to also feel like a hero right now. And you can't do it from that point of view. You can't. Paul was not a hero in his life. He was a hero after his life. He lived his life for God. He wasn't worried about being a hero. He was a prisoner most of his life. He's only a hero now because he did what we're supposed to do. And so God's the one who put him at hero status. And so I think this is the thing when you talk about the issues of goals that is a little bit misleading. Is that as if you could put this on some sort of 5-year and 10-year plan. I think we need to be very, very careful of thinking that. Where do you want to be in 5 years? I think you need to be very careful with thinking that way. Where you want to be 5 years, 10 years. Because those are the world's method of reaching goals and success, and it does help you to feel good about yourself. But how do you? What would my goal be? Okay, I'm going to have 300 people in my church in 5 years. Yeah. Is that what I'm going to do? I'm going to set a number, because I know what the next step to that is. How do I get people to come to church? Yeah. How do I get 300 people to come to church? And then start doing that, have some dancing girls and some maybe do a cocktail bar, how am I going to get 300 people to commit themselves, do or die, to serving God? I can't do that. There's nothing because it's going to take God to do that, and so I can't set that as a goal. All I can do is like what Jesus did. Jesus had, he set a goal for, 300 people. He did that in like a week, but then they all left, and then another crowd came. And it's not interesting. You see the crowds are huge, and then they go away. And then there's another crowd that was huge, and then they go away. And there was another crowd that was huge, and then they go away. And then how many of his fans were there during his crucifixion? None. So we have to be careful with this idea of goals. From the standpoint of these are my goals. The issue has to be purpose. Yeah. And so, that's I think the thing that is easily lost. And so when you have a purpose, then you can set priorities. Yeah. And that I think is probably a better way to think of things, is not setting goals, but setting priorities. But you can only set priorities when you know what your purpose is. Say, okay, this is my purpose. Like for me, pastoring. Okay, this is my purpose. So my priority is going to be being trained at a pastoral level, which means going to university for 4 years was out of the equation, because I didn't want to take the 4 years away from that, because then it would become, okay, I'm going to go to school, then I'm going to be involved, because I'm not going to go to school and learn how to be a pastor going to a university, getting a degree in electrical engineering. It's not going to help me. So that's just 4 years lost. And so for me, it was like, okay, that's not an option, and then, so, and actually the only reason I ended up getting a 2-year associate's degree in computers and electronic and computer technology was simply because it was an accelerated program that was 1 year long. I already knew all the curriculum. I had already self-taught years and years before that. So this was just a matter of having a piece of paper. That's really all it was. And it didn't take a lot of extra time to do any. As a matter of fact, it didn't take any extra time. And my commitment was 8 o'clock till 12 every Monday through Friday. And that was it. And homework was easy, so really for me, it was like, wow. So that gives me from 12 until 10, or 10:30 every day to focus on the things of God. And so that, and then all Saturday and Sunday. So it was like, wow, this is perfect. So yeah, let's do that. And so that's what I mean, this is you don't really have goals as much as priorities.
Yeah. Well, let me dig at that for a second, because, as you're talking, I'm thinking about other people who are with Jesus. You mentioning specifically the crowds and stuff like that. But his disciples, in a sense, gave kind of the same answer that Paul did. They, what would you have me do? They left all to follow him. It was kind of the same answer. But all throughout Jesus' ministry and relationship with these disciples, even till after the resurrection, they're thinking temporary. They're thinking, will you restore the kingdom to Israel? Hey, do you want us to call down fire from heaven? Jesus, let's do this, let's do that. No, you're not going to die. And then when Jesus dies, it was like, well, that's not what we had planned. And so explain that process, because for some people, like I said, for Paul, it was like, bam. There was a moment, it was a decision in that moment that he made that was like, now there's a higher calling, there's a higher goal. And that goal, like you said, dictated all his priorities. It dictated that high calling literally took over everything, even down to his plans and career and education and he just geared everything towards that. Whereas the disciples were with Jesus and they were living with him and watching him work. Even, John the Baptist, is it you or should we seek another? You know what I mean? Or should we wait for someone else? And so you had all these like different ideas, but Jesus said, I must be about my Father's business. So he has that high calling in mind, and that dictated every decision he made. But then the disciples, again, they're trailing behind Jesus with this lower goal in mind. Take me through the process. How does, because you have one extreme with Paul right in the moment, other people who are following Jesus, love Jesus, want to do the will of God, but have no idea what that ultimate call looks like.
What do you think? I'll ask this as a question. What do you think the difference was in terms of Paul and the early disciples? Well, actually, what was different at the time that Jesus confronted Paul as compared to the time when Jesus confronted Peter, James, John, the rest of the disciples? What was different?
Well, I would say the fact that Jesus had already died and rose again, but again, when he's ascending into heaven, they still ask the same questions.
But what was different? What was different was that Paul got saved in a movement. There was no movement during the time of the disciples. They were the movement.
Yeah.
And see, this to me is this has been the thing that God's put on my heart most recently, is that we always talk about these past revivals and even our fellowship, the Jesus People movement, all the momentum there that happened. When you go back and you look at the beginning of a movement, that's the key. The key is what happens during the beginning of the movement when people get it and then it makes it easier for other people to jump in.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, is that by the time Paul comes around, Paul's already fighting against Christianity. He already sees their dedication.
Yeah.
Their devotion. They all talk like Jesus. They all have the same vision. They're like scary clones, because they are so dedicated to this, And so what he's messing with, his heart's very hard, and he's a very, very dedicated religious man, but he can't help but see the dedication. He was there when Stephen was stoned. Stephen was a disciple, not even an apostle, is preaching, and they stone him. And the Bible says that Paul was there consenting to his death. Yeah, go ahead, stone him. As a leader Pharisee, giving his seal of approval on this, and said, "Here, put your coats over here," so he already sees the movement. So when he realizes that Jesus is real, he already knows what comes next, because he's seen it. He's seen it in the disciples. See, and this is the thing. This is the thing for me that is in one way very frustrating, and in one way very, very, very exciting for me as a pastor, is that if I can get a few people to really get this, to really understand what I'm talking about, the issue of being dedicated, being totally surrendered, reading the Bible, giving your whole life to that. If I can get a few people to get on board with that, and that's the frustration, because that is very, very, very difficult, very difficult. I would say near impossible to get that going. And I've been trying to do that for many years now. If I could do that, and I mean, even if those people just walked in tomorrow and decided to do that within a few weeks, even if it was just all brand new people, within a few weeks, it would become so easy for people to become a part of the movement. It'd be just so easy, because they'd just be laid out before them. But that's the problem today, is that we've got mixed signals within the church. And that's why I even started the Not Your Ordinary approach to things, is because there's such mixed signals in the church, people in the church who they're religious. We've talked about this before. They're religious. They want to be religious. They want to sin. They want to disobey God and go to heaven. They're really, if they could work it out, the only reason they come to church is they're trying to work out a way in whereby they can find the happy compromise between sin and salvation. They want this life and they want the next life, and they want to try to make them both. And they don't mind having a mediocre version of both of them, as long as they can have both. But so when a sinner comes into that kind of an environment, and they see this, and this is what I was saying, being a religious person in San Jose is so self-defeating, because you have somebody come in who's got any kind of wherewithal, any kind of desire to want to be something, and they look around and they see these people that are just basically, they're just religious losers. They've disconnected themselves from ever being anything. They have no purpose. They're just trying to get to heaven. And they're struggling, and they're fighting, and they're falling into sin, and they're repenting, and they're coming to the altar and praying, oh God, crying tears, oh God. But then the very next day they go right back into the world, and they're just living worldly things. And they're, oh, hey, look at my latest toy, look at my latest thing that I'm involved in, and oh, these things are so really cool. And, let's play with my toys, and no real desire for the things of God. And so then you have somebody come in who's a sinner, who's either got problems or is really looking for a purpose, because they've been able to do everything in the world and hasn't gotten them anywhere. And then they come into the church. Yeah. It's really hard. It's a hard sell to tell them, no, seriously, the Bible teaches a way that these people here aren't living. It's a real hard sell. And so it's a measure of frustration. But at the same time, I know if I can just get a few people to really get that, to where they say, you know what, I want to live my whole life, heart, mind, soul, and strength for this. It'll make it easier for other people to be able to come in. If I could just get 3 or 4 people like that, people could come in and they could literally become a part of that, and they would discover their purpose right away, boom, instantly, like I did. Because that was the thing, is that the reason why it was so easy for me is because there was such a good example before me. That when I came in, there's people that were a good example. I could come right in and I could realize, hey, you know what? If I pray, if I read my Bible, if I sacrifice my life to Jesus, if I seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, that all these things will be added unto me, like God did for them, then I could have that as well. My life could have that kind of purpose. And so that's the thing that's so amazing, about the difference between Paul and Peter. So these guys, 3 years, they're with Jesus. I mean, they're literally with Jesus for 3 years, struggling because all they can think of is world, this life, temporary. You're gonna usher in a new dominion, a new reign of the children of Israel. And it's like, no, that's not why I came. I didn't come for that. I've came for something far greater, and it's going to last for far longer. And he finally was able to get these men to get this, and it really was only that 120, in the upper room, but that 120 became 3,000 in one day. In one day, it went from 120 to 3,000. So let's just work that out. Go backwards. Let's just use the numbers. Okay, 12 becomes 300. Okay, 12 becomes 300. 1.2 becomes 30. It doesn't take a lot of people surrendered to start a powerful move of God. It doesn't take that many at all. But this has always been the problem, is that once the movement gets going, once there is this momentum, the original people start losing their sense of purpose. And that's what happens, is the original people lose their sense of purpose. They start making compromises. They try to work out how they can have the best of this life and the next life. And that movement begins to falter. Ultimately, it fails, or it splinters, and breaks off. And then it's only people here, there, and otherwise, and I've seen this, here, I've seen it within our fellowship, is that we send a couple into a country, and they're the first couple that lands in the country, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's this growth because their first converts have been brought in by a vision from one man. It's nothing they've ever seen before, and they become a part of it. And I can say this, sadly, is happening in China, is that we have this movement in China, over the last 5 years or so. It's been really, really powerful. But yet now there's been what was this sort of ramping up of disciples and people getting saved and wonderful, miraculous things happening. It hit a peak and is kind of going down over the other side. And you have it's becoming sort of commonplace. And so now disciples are beginning to look at things like, when do I get my own church? When can I get sent out so I can have my own church, and that I can give testimonies and stand on stages and have my name on flyers and things like that. And that begins to destroy the thing that God's doing.
I want to come back to that. We have another question here. What about people that really do want to live for God and could possibly be giving mixed signals, even though they're trying to be more Christ-like? Are they still considered religious?
Yeah, the issue isn't, and I don't want to give that kind of thinking that somehow my idea is to just simply label that there are people that are just really, really saved and there are people that are religious. It's not the issue. That's not the idea. The idea of not your ordinary church is something we're becoming, not something that we've attained. As this church is perfect. It's not that at all. My preaching is moving, to motivate, to go in that direction, to become not your ordinary Christian. But see, in questions like this, what you have to be careful of is that if you how to word it is kind of difficult without it sounding like I'm trying to attack. But the idea is that people who are giving mixed signals, okay, you have to ask the question, is that somebody who has made up their mind, to pursue the things of God, that they're going to pursue glorifying God. If you're pursuing glorifying God, then why are you giving mixed signals? The only way you can give mixed signals is if you have two pursuits. You can't give mixed signals otherwise, because the issue is not an issue of perfection. The issue is the issue of intention. Are you I'm not perfect. I'm not, few more weeks, I'll be perfect. It's nothing like that. My life is a continual improvement. We've joked about, Dave 2.0, 3.0, those kinds of things, that over the years that there's been, but in between 2.0 and 3.0, there's 2.05, 2.06B. There's all kinds of improvements that are taking place over time. And so it's not just nailing this down, but because I'm focused on an eternal purpose, like Paul, I can honestly say that I want to know him, the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of his suffering, being made conformable to his death, that I may obtain to the resurrection of the dead. Paul is, that's the formula, as it were, is I want to know him. And so constantly I'm looking at my life and evaluating my life and trimming off the fat out of my life of things that are not eternal, things that are not taking me closer to my pursuit. I never dreamed I would be as dedicated as I am today. I didn't think I physically could be, because I wasn't like that. I would look at my pastor, Pastor Warner, I think this guy is a machine, an absolute machine. Even when he's on vacation, he still writes lists of things he's going to do for his vacation. It's like, and with his health issues that he's had and stuff like that, it's just, it's amazing to me. It's just absolutely amazing. His devotion, his he's got the library of reading and quoting this, that's, and the other things, and listening to him thinking. And I remember as a young disciple thinking, I will never achieve that. I'm not that disciplined. I just don't have that. I don't like reading. I'm not that disciplined. I like doing things on a whim, and it's like, planning for me is painful, because I know that I'm going to write a bunch of stuff down and I'm going to probably only do half of it. And so it's like that was my attitude. It's like, I'll never be like that. But what I realized is when I stopped worrying about, okay, I'm going to read this much, I'm going to write this much, I'm going to, listen to this, these many books, and, I'm going to read these, when I stopped doing all that, and I just said, I want to pursue you. I want to glorify you with my life, and let God come with his chisel and his hammer and let him chip off the things off of my life that needed to be chipped off, until I got to the place where he wanted me to be. And now I can look at that and I can think, this is amazing what God has done in my life, simply because of my determination, that I've prioritized Jesus. And so these other things, it's funny, because things that I tried to do when I really wasn't motivated to do them, from the standpoint of my pursuit, it was impossible. I would do them and then go back, and do them and then go back, and do them and go back, and do them and then go back. And it was just this continual cycle of trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing. But what I found the real breakthrough is when I stopped worrying about trying to be something that I wasn't, and started focusing on being something. It was like, just, God, I want to glorify you. What do you want? What do you want me to do? Give me wisdom, give me understanding, help me. And that I developed an appetite for that. There was an appetite to be in the presence of God. So that made prayer easier. The discipline of prayer was not that great when I didn't have any real desire to hear from God. There wasn't really anything in me. I didn't want to hear from, what do I want to hear from God for? Because I didn't have a pursuit. I didn't have a goal. There wasn't anything. But now when it's like, God, I'm preaching 3 times a week, and I'm doing a podcast and doing a new converts class. God, I want to, I want to do these things because I want to glorify you, but I need inspiration. I'm not going to be able to do this by reading, so many hours a day and things like that. I need inspiration. And so God would inspire me, and then there was like, wow, this is really exciting when I get inspired. And then when I started reading and realizing, wow, reading inspires you. You may read for 15 minutes and get 2 or 3 inspirations of ideas of things that will improve your life. And it's like, this is worth it. It's worth that 15 minutes or a half an hour or an hour. And the time just keeps going up, and there are times where, I'm like, worked out. I'm just like, I can't even think because my mind is so saturated. And so one of my escapes is I go and sit in my jacuzzi and listen to an audiobook, and I've got some waterproof paper. And so I just sit there, and then when I get ideas, so I'm not sitting in front of a computer screen. I'm not trying to write a sermon. I'm not trying to do anything except just refill the wells, And so then, and I'll write down things that inspire me, not with a purpose for a sermon. Just, hey, that's very inspiring to me. And that's a great thought. And then sometimes I'll get a thought, and oh, that is so wonderful, and I want to go research that thought later on. So I can't, so it's like, man, when I get out of here, I'm gonna look into this, and so I'll make some notes to myself that way. And so it's not, I'm not trying, I'm not trying to achieve something. I'm not making goals to achieve things. It's an attitude that I want to be inspired. To be able to do something for God. I don't want to, it's also to help out a little bit. It also helps, which is why you have to do this when you're young. That's what I said about getting a purpose, in your youth, is why that's so important, is that as you get older, your desire, your appetite for staying relevant, your fear of becoming irrelevant, that's probably a better way of putting it. Your fear of becoming irrelevant goes up. See, when you're 20 years old, you are relevant by definition. There's no such thing as being irrelevant at 20 years old. You're not old enough to be irrelevant. You are the in crowd. But when you get to be 30 and then 40 and then 50, you become less and less relevant, less and less important. And so when you're 30 years old, and you're, oh yeah, I was part of the gangs, and and oh man, I'm an OG, and it's like, yeah, you're an old G, you're an old guy, it's people aren't sitting there going, wow, tell me more. You're just because you're not, you're just a 30-year-old useless human being, and because you're not pursuing anything.
Yeah.
You haven't, even if you oh, I used to be in the gangs. Well, sadly, some people should have stayed in the gangs because that's all they think about is the old days. It's like you might as well have stayed in the gangs and maybe got killed. And at least then you'd have been, you've had some sort of value to your life. But now you're just an ex-gang member that's nothing. So what's the point? Who cares? You're irrelevant.
We got another question. I'm going to actually, I'm going to ask this I'm going to ask this with my next question. Because it's relevant, and you can just basically you can get 2 at bats at one pitch. So we'll do so. Brittany Minor again is asking. So back to raising kids, particularly boys. How do I instill the issue of purpose in them from a young age, and how young? And I want to pair that with you're talking about something you have found. And I actually put the scripture in Matthew 13. A man who seeking goodly pearls finds one of great price and goes sells all that he has to buy it, to own it. How do you convince people? Like you, in a sense, you're talking about having found the pearl. You have found the pearl. How do you convince other people that pearl is worth so much?
I can't. Not possible.
Okay. So then how do men find that pearl?
You have to become a pearl dealer first.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah.
Because if you're not a pearl dealer, it doesn't matter. If you are not looking for the pearl of great price, it won't matter when you find it. It doesn't make any difference. And that's the key in that parable, is that he was looking for the pearl of great price because he's a pearl merchant, And so when he discovers the pearl, because he's looking for something, he's looking for a specific thing that has value, and then he finds it, and then what he does afterwards, and that's really what we're talking about, is that idea. And so to try to go back to this question, it is really difficult because it's a mom raising boys. It really is the dad. It really is the dad. The dad is the one that is going to have the most powerful impact. And the only way, because I want to put this in a really generic way, because I know the circumstances with Brittany, as Brittany being my daughter. But so I want to put this in a very generic way. Is that as a mother with a deadbeat father, and when I say deadbeat, what I mean is not that he's not there and he's not paying his alimony or anything like that. I'm just saying he just has no real initiative. The best thing I think that a mom can do is be pointing out good men, pointing out great men like their pastor, introducing them to men of days gone by, introducing them to podcasts of great men. And obviously this is something you're going to do at older years, but in the younger years, I think the best thing a mom can do is just to instill especially into their sons. But let's not make this gender specific.
Yeah.
This is men and women. It's not just about men. The issue is that there's a purpose. You've been created for a purpose. God has created you for a purpose, and keeping that thought in mind. And so when they sin, as they're growing up and they're sinning and they're doing stupid stuff, you're bringing them back to the idea. And you'll see this in many great mothers over the years, is that they would teach their boys, you're not like other boys. You shouldn't be doing that. Listen to Ben Carson's conversations about his mom. It's phenomenal. Read some of his books. I wish I could remember the name of a specific book, but he does in a couple of his books. He's talking about his mother's influence, the power, because his dad wasn't on the scene. I mean, he was, but he wasn't. And the powerful influence of his mother. She would pretend to read their schoolwork, but she couldn't read. And she would pretend to read their schoolwork and say, and he'd tell them, you need to, she could read a little bit, but she wasn't, a scholarly person, but she kept instilling into her boys, listen, you're better than this. When they started hanging out with the troublemakers, you're better than this. You're better than this. You're a Carson. You don't have to live like this. And it was a big difficult chore for her. She was very ill-equipped, but amazing that she was able to have, and she was a godly woman. And so I believe that there was probably some wisdom from God there as well. But that, I would say, is to pray. Yeah, pray for them and pray for godly wisdom to direct your children, because your children are going to make their own decisions in life as they grow up. They're not going to just do what you say because you say it. They're going to do what they say because they're going to do what they're going to do because they believe it's the right way to go. So the question is how successful you are on convincing them the right way to go. It's more it. And so it's not. But like I said, it's not gender specific either.
We'll go ahead and let everybody know we're going to go for probably another 15, 20 minutes. So if you guys want to throw in any off
13 minutes.
13,
okay. 8:15.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So if anybody wants to throw in any questions that are off topic, or you don't know if they're off topic or on topic, you can throw those in now, and that'll give us enough time to field those as they come in. So back to what you were talking about in the kind of the decline in that you've been noticing in China, how they're kind of gone a peak and they're kind of going down another hill on the other side.
Yeah, and I do need to point out it's a relative thing, because the point that I'm making is from zero to what we have now, and to see how that process has slowed.
So my question though is that how, because it's happened in America as well. You had a movement and it's gone down, and we're actually kind of at the bottom of the hill now. We're trying to start another movement. And so what or who is to blame for that? What and it seems to be, you see that repeated throughout the scriptures as well. You have the children of Israel peak, and then they go down the valley, the peak and valley. And so it seems to be just human nature. What is it? What is it in human nature?
Biblically and historically, it's always been the older people. And when I say older people, I'm not talking about, old people, like, people who are in their 60s or 70s or something like that, because they're just old. What I'm talking about is the people who have been involved in Christianity for a period of time, but they've lost the fire. They don't have a fire anymore. They're the blame. They are the blame. Is they've lost their fire, and so but they still hang around the church, and so they're still there. They're lukewarm, and the Bible's very clear. God says, "I hate lukewarm. I'm going to spit you out of my mouth." But what happens is if you look historically, is the lukewarm try to assert themselves as the new on fire. So they're on fire because they come to church 3 times a week. And that's really the only criteria. They come, they sit in the seat, and they go home and they say, see, I'm so on fire because I go to church 3 times a week. What a sacrifice I'm making. But yet, there's no sacrifice. They just don't have any friends and they don't have a life. And so they come to church 3 times a week. They're not coming 3 times a week to hear from God. They're just coming 3 times a week to be a part of the scene because they don't have anything else. And that's tragic. It's tragic when people get to that point in their lives, and then new people come in and, it's the I've preached on this before. It's been mentioned by other people as well. As it's the old prophet, as the Bible talks about an old prophet. There's a young prophet full of zeal comes in, miracles, powerful things happen, but God tells him to do specific things. And so he's doing those things until he meets up with the old prophet. And the old prophet tells him, no, you don't need to do those things. You just do what I say. Do what I say and everything will be fine. And he ends up getting killed. And it's like an illustrated lesson, to don't hang out with people like that. Don't hang out with lukewarm Christians because they'll tell you things. They'll tell you things that are wrong. And it's funny because how this works. Is people who they think they're it. They think that they're the flavor. The favorite flavor. And in the church, they're a legend in their own mind, as the saying goes. Is they really believe this, and that's in the beginning when I started preaching the way that I was preaching and starting to focus on not your ordinary church and really exposing the fallacy that an old dead Christian is better than a living sinner. And when I expose that as not being true, it's actually the other way around, that dead sinners, there's more potential in a dead sinner than there is in an old living saint. Saints in quotes. And so that because they're what cause people to not get saved. Their deadness, their lukewarmness has an effect. And I see it, even with the push, the number of times that people, new converts, I hear, overhear a conversation between a new convert and an older convert, and they're completely erasing. It's like I know they're not doing it on purpose, but it seems like it's almost on purpose, which makes me wonder if it's not just simply that older converts become just a tool of the devil. As I watch them erase the sermon, as soon as the service is over, they'll go and they talk to a new convert, and they're just having a conversation with a new convert, and I can see them erasing the sermon. They're literally erasing the sermon. All the things that were mentioned in the sermon. It's just like, oh yeah, well, I don't do that, and I haven't done that for years, and I haven't been like this, and I don't really care about those kinds of things. But actually, what I really like, and so there's this emphasis on, hey, listen, we're women, we have women's needs, and so we've got to have our needs met. We've got to paint our nails, we've got to do our eyelashes, we've got to buy our makeup. So we need to talk about this kind of stuff because this is part of being a woman, and especially as a woman of God, you need to make sure you have the right makeup. It's like, nobody would ever say that, but it is what's being said, And then men, hey, we got our needs too, got sports and hobbies and, our professions and, this is and that's and the other things and my money and my investments and this is that's and the other things. And I hear these kinds of conversations going on, just erasing what happened, an hour at tops, an hour of somebody being in contact with God. And in 5 minutes, it's erased by older converts who really aren't interested in those things. They really don't care because they don't have a pursuit of the things of God. They're not pursuing the things of God. They just want to survive. They just want to make it from day to day. And they just want to, if I can make it to heaven, that's great. I know I'm not fruitful. I know I'm not winning people to Jesus. I know I have nothing really to say. And then go run over and want to speak into new converts' lives and kill what God's doing because they don't have a pursuit. They don't have a it's as simple as that. They want to be men and women of God without having a pursuit of being a man or woman of God. They want to just for God to come and just wave his magic wand and make them like that. And if he doesn't do that, it's obviously not God's will for them to be.
You're actually kind of answering, well, at least I think you're answering the question that's being asked now. How would you know if you're going lukewarm? What kind of things should you look out for?
Well, when you look at the clock and you see that if you leave right now, you can make it to prayer meeting, and you go, no, and you finish the things that you need to do. You know, if you leave right now, you'll leave things undone. That's when you're beginning to be lukewarm. Do I need to go any further?
No, like I said, it's kind of,
because that's the truth. The truth is when the things of God are trumped by the things of the world, then you're becoming lukewarm. Because but I've got responsibilities. Well, see, when you're becoming lukewarm is when you say, I know I've got responsibilities that I have to take care of.
say that.
That's how you know when you're becoming lukewarm, because what you're doing actually in a roundabout way is you're making excuses so that you can be lukewarm. You want to be lukewarm. That's your goal. Your goal is, I want to bring the fire down because it's too expensive. It costs my life too much. And so I want to bring the fire down. I want to be able to, I don't want to be cold. I just don't want to be hot. So that's okay. I miss a few services. I miss a few prayer meetings. I don't go to Bible studies. I don't go, to outreaches. I'm okay. You're lukewarm. You're lukewarm, because that's how you want to live. It's not, my life is so complicated that I can't do those things. It's, I want free time. I want to be able to, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I want to be able to do what I want to do. I'll come to church on Wednesday. I'll come to church on Sunday. I'll be involved in a few things in church every now and then when it's seasonal. As long as I don't have to do it every day of every week, that's fine.
Yeah. I got one more question, and then I'm done. Jordan Peterson comment again. He said, and you actually quoted this in your sermon, he said, the church, he's talking to a Catholic bishop, and he says, the church is not demanding enough of young men. What should the church be demanding of young men? I want the not your ordinary church, Pastor Dave Ford,
not young
order
men, young people. Young people. And see, this is the thing that's interesting.
I should qualify
is that Jordan Peterson is reaching hundreds and hundreds of young people using the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all there is to it. He is in his books. Yeah. He's constantly quoting scriptures. He actually did a series out of the Old Testament from the book of Genesis. He's not a Christian. He's not a Christian. This is amazing to me. But he has flocks of people who say, oh, well, that's why they come, because he's not a Christian. No, they come because he acts like the Bible's true. The problem is that many Christians act like the Bible's not true. They may believe it is true, but they act like it's not true. It's just the opposite. And so that's the issue. So what was your exact question?
What should the church be demanding?
What should the church?
Of
okay.
people?
Well, and that's why I knew, because I heard that same quote, and I said, I know I'm hitting the nail right on the head for our generation, and particularly for where our church is located, is that if people are going to be reached for the gospel, they're only going to be reached by on fire, sold out individuals. And man, people just aren't interested in the gospel, and it's so hard for me to win people. No, that's not true. That's not true. It's not hard to win people, and people are not so hardened to the gospel they don't want to hear it. It's that they're tired of religion. They're tired of this part-time pursuit of the things of God. They're just not into it. So you get somebody like Jordan Peterson who is saying, this is what the meaning of these scriptures, this is what they mean, and this is what it was about, and talking about demands. And, he used the word adventure in that podcast. And, I wonder how many Christians can sit there and say, you know what, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any of these things anymore. I'm not living in sin. I'm not having sex with my girlfriend. I'm not, even compromising that. I'm not, trying to walk the line. I'm way far away from the line. And the reason why I do that is because this life as a Christian is an adventure. I wonder how many Christians would actually use the word adventure in talking about their salvation. Because it's not. It's not an adventure. And the reason it's not an adventure is because it's not a pursuit. It only becomes an adventure when it's a pursuit. And so that's really the problem. What the church, it's not what the church should be teaching. It's what the church should be doing. And if it was doing that, then there wouldn't be a problem. If the church as a whole, everybody, not just a select few, but everybody in the church demonstrated that living for God was an adventure like it was in the, can you come up with a better word to describe the New Testament church in the book of Acts? It was obviously an adventure. These people are like, man, this is crazy. They're killing us, but we're going to keep preaching. We're going to keep preaching because there's an adventure in it. There's a sense of purpose. There's a sense of cause. Like David said, is there not a cause? Yeah. And that's the thing is that young people today, they want a cause.
So what's the requirement?
They want
the demand of people. What is it? What's the thing that the church isn't demanding?
You've
said it. You've beat around it a few times. But what's specific? Come on, come on.
Well, you're looking for me to say a specific thing, so I don't know how to do that.
What's required of you?
Everything.
The pearl of great price. What's required?
Well, you have to become a pearl merchant, like I said earlier.
Everything.
Yeah,
You're saying everything. You keep saying it, but you're not saying it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
The whole idea of being sold out. The whole idea of demand
yeah.
for everything. You can't. The whole idea of not being able to.
Yeah, I know. But it is everything. But that everything means nothing unless you define what everything is. And so that's the problem. Is that I don't. It's too cliche to say it demands everything.
Why is it cliche?
Because anything is worthwhile demands everything of you, but nobody ever pays it. But this is the thing is that you can't experience this. You can't, those of you listening to me on this podcast, you think, man, you must really have to work yourself up to do these podcasts to have this kind of excitement. I talk to people like this. This is how I talk normally when I talk about the things
It legitimately is.
and it's because I made the decision. I made the decision to give everything. But you can't give everything until you decide you want to pursue this. This is all you want in life. This is your pursuit. I mentioned the book, The Secret of the Stairs, and then the other book by Arthur Wallace, In the Day of Thy Power. Those two books, they changed my life. They literally changed my life. And this is years after being a Christian. They changed my life because I realized I was spending so much of my life wanting to be an on-fire Christian and trying to establish discipline in my life and set goals and do all these kinds of things, and realized that the problem is that wasn't me. It wasn't me. I was pretending, not even pretending. I was trying to be something that I wasn't, and that I honestly had to look myself in the mirror and say, you know what? You don't want to be this either. So why are you doing this? You're putting the cart before the horse, and that's the problem. Is there are people, you get stirred up and you hear me and you get excited about all these kinds of things, but the truth matters, you really do not want to be what I'm talking about. You do not want to be this, and that's the question. Is but yet your heart is inside of you going, you're an idiot. That's why. You're stupid. That's why. You're a fool. That's why. That's why you don't want to be those kinds of things. 'Cause you're a lazy piece of dirt and you don't want to do what needs to be done in order to do this. And at some point, somebody's got to win this fight, and that's the thing is that somebody has to win this fight. And the only way that can happen is you got to get on your face before God. You just have to get on your face before God and say, God, I'm tired of this fight. I'm tired of being a lazy, useless, good for nothing. I'm tired of being a lukewarm. I'm tired of all this. I don't want to be this anymore, God. What do I do? And let God be the one to help you. It's not surrendering everything. It's a something. There's a something. Every one of you that's listening to me right now, there's a something. There is one something that is your price. And the devil's paid it, and that's why you're having the trouble. And until you can deal with that issue and say, you know what, I'm not going to be bought so cheaply. I'm not doing that anymore. Until you can do that, you're gonna. It's gonna be a never-ending battle. But when you do it, and that's the whole idea of the pearl of great price, is that he saw it, he knew what he wanted that, and he sold everything to get that one pearl. And so that's the key. That really is the key, is until you're a pearl merchant, you're not going to be willing to sell everything. And so what's the something? That's the real question.
Yeah. All right. That was good. Apparently we had some feedback, and we will definitely try to solve those issues. We will solve those issues. We do apologize about that, but we appreciate you guys joining us, and we will definitely see you guys next week. Don't forget about our services in person. If you're in town, you're local, we invite you to come and join us 7 p.m. tomorrow. We will be here at the church. You can come and join us in person. So come and be a part of what God is doing. And again, we appreciate the questions, and we'll see you guys over the weekend.